What it do, citizens of P-Town? UFC 296 is closing out 2023 of UFC events, and on paper, it's looking to be like a hell of a way to close out the show. Very stacked card, one of the most stacked cards of the year. A lot of interesting matchups too. I'm gonna go through the whole event, but I'm not gonna elaborate into the main card because with my talkative ass, we'll be here a while if I go over everything. So yes, just throwing out my predictions from the early prelims to the end of the prelims. I got Randy Brown by decision. I got Martin Boudet in this one. I got Andre Fili by also decision. I am also going to lean on the favorite here with Tagir Ulanbekov in this match. Honestly, I would probably say Dustin Jacoby. I kind of agree with the oddmakers on this one too. Not really anything specific. I guess Casey O'Neill. Out of all the fights in this card, yeah, people are looking forward to the Casey O'Neill and Ariana Lipsky fight. Let's hope for Cody Garbrandt to win, and I think the odds makers show that too. I guess Irene Aldana in this fight, and I'm gonna go with the underdog in this matchup, Josh Emmett. Okay, so main card time. We're gonna actually get into my predictions. I'm gonna actually elaborate. We're opening up UFC 296 with Vicente Luque versus Ian Machado Gary. Okay, so while the Neil Magny fight was definitely a um, oh man, it's the morning right now. I can't really think of words. That was definitely a decent test for Ian Garry. To go up against a much more experienced fighter who, maybe is not the most consistent, but still has a pretty decent resume. Vicente Luque is also another big jump in competition and another really good test for Ian Garry. I am kind of leaning Ian Garry to win this. Uh, as I feel like Vicente Luque lately just hasn't been like as dangerous as he was before. He did recently beat Rafael dos Anjos, and it was a very good win. But once again, I don't know if he's quite gonna be able to take out Ian Garry in today. I can elaborate a little more on that. I do think he has a chance to take him out, but going with Ian Garry, I just feel like Vicente Luque's head movement isn't quite all the way there anymore, and I can just see Ian Garry throwing those high kicks. I think that's what Luque has to worry about the most: the high kicks of Ian Garry and how he's gonna set that up. Vicente Luque is not really gonna evade the head kicks. He is just he's gonna shell up a lot, and I think that if this fight goes to decision, which I think is pretty likely, because Vicente Luque is very tough. I could see Garry taking the scorecards in terms of damage, in terms of visible damage, of just appearing to land the cleaner shots and such like that. Vicente Luque definitely has a very good chance, probably the best chance out of all the underdog. Well, I don't know if I'd make that statement. As far as the odd makers have it, I do think he has one of the most closest chances to win, because a lot of people are pointing out the video, the clip of Ian Garry getting knocked out by not knocked out, knocked down by Song Keenan, how he threw that left hook to the body, kept his guard a little bit too down, his chin was wide open, got countered, paid the price for it. And people are saying that, yeah, Vicente Luque would be able to take Garry out if he made that same mistake, which I do agree with. I do think that Vicente Luque can find that shot. I think that despite Ian Garry's tall frame, he surprisingly doesn't fight as long for the weight class. I believe Vicente Luque does have a longer reach, not by much, but I do think with Ian Garry's style, it's not as fighting long despite his taller frame. So I do think Vicente Luque could definitely get some good shots off of him. People want Ian Garry to get knocked out because of the recent. I mean, you know what it is, like, with all the drama. To be honest, I could care less about that type of shit. If I'm gonna root against a fighter or root for a fighter to get knocked out, it's you know um, living with his wife's ex-husband isn't really gonna be a thing that I'm gonna root against somebody over. But okay, I'm gonna talk ramble too much. Honestly, yeah, I'm probably leaning Ian Garry by decision, just in terms of output, just in terms of clear shots. But Vicente Luque has a better chance than the odds have it, and he's not going to be the only matchup that I think is going to be like this case in which the underdog has a better chance than the odds have it. So yeah, anyways, probably leaning Ian Garry by decision. I think it's going to be a great test for him, and Vicente Luque definitely has a chance, and I could see it happening. Okay, well, as far as fights that I feel like the underdog doesn't really have much of a chance, we got Paddy Pimblett versus Tony Ferguson. This is one of the most blatant, disrespectful, and just obvious feeds that I've seen from the UFC since Khamzat Chimaev versus Nate Diaz. This is terrible. Like, this is just disrespectful to Tony Ferguson. Paddy is not going to gain really much stock at all from this fight. But on paper, it's like, oh my goodness, he had a close fight against Jared Gordon, but boom, he's beating Tony Ferguson. Aha! Now Dana White's potential cash cow is back in contention, back on the hype train. Yeah, I got Paddy Pimblett in this fight by round two finish. I don't know, man. I don't know if Tony Ferguson's Hell Week with David Goggins is really going to help him at all. I think while Tony Ferguson is still going to be able to beat up anybody at the club or anybody at the bar, like we all know what's going on with Tony Ferguson right now. Like, he's 40 years old, he hasn't looked good in years. Well, okay, he looked good last year, but he has not looked good his last two fights. I'll say that. And he's coming up against a young, not even in his prime, Paddy Pimblett, 6-fight win streak, whereas Tony Ferguson has a 6-fight losing streak. Just got choked out by Bobby Green. I mean, yeah, I don't want to go into too much detail. I don't think I need to. I think I can agree with the odds makers on this one. Paddy the Pimblett by a win. Yeah, I don't know if Hell Week is going to help Tony Ferguson. He's already mentally strong. I don't think he needed um, any mental boost. I don't think he needed anything in terms of cardio, because cardio has not really been Tony Ferguson's problem lately. I wonder if just like the literal accumulated damage that he might have gotten during the Hell Week camp with David Goggins might be doing worse for him. But anyways, yeah, Paddy Pimblett by finish. Very depressing. Don't need to go into detail. Okay, I have been waiting to talk about this matchup for a long time. Not only is it a matchup with two really great guys, really likable fighters, entertaining fighters, and popular fighters, but honestly, I do have more to say about this one, because in this matchup, Stephen Thompson versus Shavkhat Rakhmonov, I think that Wonderboy is underrated in this matchup, and I think he has a good chance to win. All right, so hear me out. Hear me out for a second. Okay, let me explain. Okay, I'll explain why Stephen Thompson has a chance, and I'll also explain why Shavkat is still more likely to win this fight. Okay, so let me explain. It's no secret that Wonderboy's holes in his MMA game lately, in terms of the welterweight top contenders, is his grappling. Okay, it's no secret. It's a big reason why he is such a huge underdog in this fight. Of course, we can't forget that Shavkat is not even in his prime yet, has 17 wins, undefeated, all finishes, including submissions as well as TKOs. Um, that all is obviously a factor. But yes, grappling. Here's the thing about Wonderboy. I think that Wonderboy's takedown defense is underrated. I think that it gets put down a lot because how much he's been controlled. And that's the thing. I think that the biggest holes in Wonderboy's game right now is not his takedown defense. It's being controlled. Okay? Against, a control wrestler, a control grappler like Bilal Muhammad. Like, he has very good takedowns, but also it's definitely more about the relentlessness of Bilal's style. And once he was able to get Thompson down, he was able to hold him down. Kind of the same thing with Burns. You know what I mean? And Burns, I guess you could argue Burns isn't like the strongest takedown artist though. But I do think it's his relentlessness that did kind of put Thompson down, and his high BJJ proficiency was able to keep him down. I think that Wonderboy's takedown defense is pretty underrated. I think it's really great still. And the thing is, in terms of the specific matchup, I don't think Shavkat Rakhmonov has that great takedown offense. Okay, I'm a fan of Shavkat, and I think he's extremely dangerous. But when you go back and watch his fights, I don't think he's as big of a world ender as the odds makers have it. You know what I mean? Um, obviously, once again, undefeated with all finishes is not to be taken lightly at all in MMA. Is not to be taken lightly. But one thing I don't really see as much is his takedown offense. Okay, when you go back and watch his fights, Rachmanov doesn't really get much submissions off the takedowns. He was swinging around Cowboy Oliveira around. He was literally he like picked him up, was swinging him around. His legs were off the ground, and he still had to fight for a takedown afterwards and couldn't get it for a while after that moment. Okay, and of course we saw what happened in the Jeff Neal fight. Rachmanov could not take Jeff Neal down, and once it started staying on the feed, that's when the holes in Rachmanov's game started to show, and it became a war. Like, Jeff Neal was kind of piecing up Rachmanov. Rachmanov was doing the same to Jeff Neal, but we saw once it kind of wasn't on the ground, Shavkhat kind of took a lot of damage there. And I think that can be a similar situation in this fight. I think that Thompson could definitely stuff Rakhmonov's takedowns. Maybe not all, but once again, a better chance that people have it. And if Jeff Neal could accomplish that much on the feet against Rakhmonov as Neal did, then imagine what Wonder Boy could do. All right, Wonder Boy, while still not as fast as he's been, 10 years ago, he's still pretty fast. And Rakhmonov isn't that fast of a striker either. And of course, people critique his head movement too. I think that Stephen Thompson could definitely get some combos off of Rakhmonov in this fight. Okay, so you kind of heard me out a little bit there. Maybe you're not convinced. And I'm going to go and talk about why, yeah, Rakhmonov can still probably win this. Because one factor that I forgot for a long time was like, oh my goodness, dude, like Jeff Neal, pretty underrated. Jeff Neal is also pretty underrated going to that fight too. Let's remind ourselves, and he did very well. While Jeff Neal was able to stuff a lot of Rakhmonov's takedowns and made it a war in that second and third round. One thing that I did forgot that people had to remind me was that Jeff Neal did miss weight. Okay, he did miss weight, and it. Now I'm not here to say whether or not it was intentional, but it definitely affected the fight. It definitely affected the fight. It definitely affected his takedown defense, and so that's definitely a factor. Stephen Thompson's not going to miss weight. Okay, and also with you know, I don't need to remind y'all with Rakhmonov being not even 30 yet. I think he's 28, 29, not even turning 30 yet. He absolutely can improve more in between fights than Wonderboy can. As far as improvement, Wonderboy can't really do much. He's only really just putting in the work to decline, as least as possible. Rakhmonov can absolutely improve much more in between March and December. He can improve his takedown offense. He's still very powerful. He's still very good on the feet. He's very creative in his submissions. I know that some of y'all were going to comment down below, or maybe already have. Rakhmonov's submission threat isn't his takedowns. It's his creativity. Okay, he did pull that guillotine on Cowboy Oliveira out of nowhere. And of course, after the war with Jeff Neal, he did get creative with that standing neck crank, rear naked choke. I think it was a neck crank. Yeah. Um, that standing submission against Jeff Neal. He was very creative in that, and that's the threat um, to Thompson. He's going to be a threat on the feet, and definitely a threat against the cage. The knees with the octagon control, maybe a little judo sweep. He's going to be very creative. Okay, and so yeah, I do agree that Shavkhat is more likely to win this, but also my heart of hearts can also see a world where Stephen Thompson wins this fight by decision. Genuinely. I think that he has a better chance on the feet. I think that even though he's not as fast as he has been, I think he's really good at counters. I think that if Rakhmonov gets in Thompson's box, he can counter. As long as he keeps it on the feet, I do think he has a very good chance. Rakhmonov's head movement has been critiqued. And yeah, I do think that Stephen Wonderboy Thompson has a really good chance to win by decision. Put that there, folks, as my prediction that is most likely to get aged like the worst of milks. And yeah, talked a lot about that matchup, but yeah, one I've been wanting to talk about for a while. Anyways, we got a fight I'm really, really, really excited for in the flyweight division. Excuse me, virus protection. Don't need that. Anyways, um, flyweight division. Love this fight. Love this division. And love these two fighters. We got Brandon Royval versus Alexandre Pantoja 2 for the UFC Flyweight Championship. Okay, so ordinarily, I would say, well, no, I would say this in general. Brandon Royval is a pretty tough fight for everyone at flyweight. He's extremely active on the feet, or he's just active in general. High output fighter. He's pushing the pace. He's always hunting for the finish, always moving forward, always active. He has a decent amount of variety in his strikes. He loves that roundhouse kick to the body. He loves throwing up the knees, up the middle. His spinning elbows, his elbows. Very active on the feet, and of course, his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu background, very efficient BJJ. Once again, great finishing instincts, hunting for the finish on the ground, really great scrambles and active scrambles. Right, I think that he normally is a tough matchup for a lot of fighters in this division at 125. But I think it just so happens that Alexandre Pantoja is a matchup that he can't win. I have Alexandre Pantoja winning this fight, uh, probably in a similar fashion than their first fight by a round 3 submission. Okay, and here's why. Pantoja, once again, I want to say, yeah, Pantoja is a bad matchup for Royval, I think. I mean, first and foremost, we've seen Pantoja submit Royval. We've seen the gaps that these two have in BJJ. Pantoja's is better. Okay, not only is it more efficient, but Royval in the past has been pretty lenient in allowing takedowns. You know what I mean? And whether or not that means his takedown defense is a little iffy, or he just kind of lets it happen because of his confidence in his BJJ. Either way, he does get taken down frequently, and against an aggressive, you know, grappler like Pantoja, I just feel like the opportunities for Pantoja is going to be pretty frequent in this fight to take it to the ground. And like I said, we saw the gaps in their BJJ. I do think that Pantoja could still submit Royval. Royval's scrambles are really good, but once again, you can't really be lenient when it comes to Pantoja. You know what I mean? For someone who already takes so many opportunities to bring it to the ground in a fight, to mixing up his strikes to shoot for takedowns and level change, you really can't give Pantoja any leniency. Okay, and even if you're not getting submitted, Royval's still going to be giving up control time in the fight, allowing the takedowns, and that was the thing that kind of edged out Pantoja's win over Moreno. You could argue that Moreno did accomplish more in terms of damage, but it was the moments where Pantoja was just kind of putting Moreno on the ground, holding him there, holding him against the cage, taking his back, that kind of edged him out the fight. And you just can't have that. The game plan for Royval is that he needs to push the pace. He needs to initiate the takedowns, which is a big ask. And speaking of big asks, some people, well, not some people, but speaking of big asks, it is possible that Royval could spark Pantoja pretty early. You know what I mean? Time a really great knee up the middle, really come in with a great game plan, and just kind of spark Pantoja early on. But everybody has been saying this. It is no secret that Pantoja is impossible to be finished, bro. Okay, not impossible, but he's never been finished in his UFC career. No, his MMA career, he's never been finished. Hardly been wobbled. I think knocked down once by Davison Figueiredo, who, needs no reminding is, one of, if not the most powerful flyweight in UFC history. Okay, Figgy couldn't even finish Pantoja. All right, had a war with Figgy. Pantoja had a war with Brandon Moreno. It's a really big ask for Royval to just spark Pantoja and knock him out early on in the fight, because I don't think he's going to outgrapple him. He needs to outstrike him, and that will require keeping it on the feet while being more active, right? And really hurting him more and kind of dissuading Pantoja from initiating takedowns. Like, it's a really big ask. It's just a tough matchup. Pantoja is a pretty complete fighter. Royval is a very complete fighter too, but I think that Pantoja is just more complete. You know what I mean? Pantoja might not have as much variance in his striking, but his striking is powerful enough to hurt Royval. Royval does get hurt pretty often against good strikers, and it's good enough to keep it on the feet, to not be lost on the feet. And of course, Pantoja can initiate the scrambles. I think that Pantoja just has more opportunities to whether or not it's point fighting or hunting for the finish. I got Pantoja by round 3 submission. All right, but I'm still excited for this fight. I'm a huge fan of both these fighters, and I honestly don't mind either of them winning. I'm just going to enjoy this fight, however long it lasts, whether or not it's long or very short. Okay, so last but not least, been talking so much, and we have one of the more compelling matchups in the main event: Colby Covington versus Leon Edwards. I've been 50-50 about this fight ever since it was booked. Okay, it's just hard to say. On one hand, sometimes I wake up, I'm like, you know what? Leon Edwards has beaten Usman twice. Colby Covington has lost to Usman twice on paper. I feel like Leon Edwards should win this. Leon Edwards would eat up Colby Covington in the clinch. He's better in the clinch. He's got them leg kicks. He's gonna do more visible damage on Covington, being the bigger guy and the more powerful striker. And then some days I wake up, I'm just like, you know what? I think if Colby Covington, that beat Masvidal, showed up to fight Edwards in March, I feel like he would have dissuaded, or not dissuaded, he would have swayed the judges on the scorecards, and he probably would have been that Leon Edwards. With the output, with Usman being a little bit more gun shy than he was as normal in the third fight against Edwards, I just feel like a more active Colby Covington would have been able to win those scorecards. And then, I think about how, with Colby being a pressure fighter, and how Leon Edwards isn't as good off the back foot, and how just, bring a lot of pressure and relentless output could just, eventually fold Edwards. And I think Colby Covington wins this. You know what I mean? I just toss and turn so much. And at the end of the day, I just kind of concluded myself that if I can't make a prediction on how the fight's going to go, I can at least make a prediction on something that is out of the fighter's hands. And that's the scorecards. Okay, I said earlier that Colby Covington has lost twice to Usman on paper. Some people do believe that Covington did enough to win against Usman in the second fight. Now, I'm not going to be here to give my opinion on that scorecard because that doesn't matter. What I am going to say is that if this fight goes to a decision, which is very likely, I think this decision is extremely likely here across both these fighters. If it goes to a decision and the fight is close enough, I think that the UFC will give it to Colby Covington. Okay, like it's no secret that Dana White wants Colby Covington as champion. Okay, like why else is this third title shot from Colby like the least deserving of all of his title shots? You know what I mean? No, you know what I mean. Like it's no secret that this is Colby Covington's least deserved title shot. At the very least, in his second one, he beat a former champion, right? But with all of Colby Covington's inactivity and not fighting and beating people under the age of 35 in a long time, Dana White wants Colby Covington as champion, despite this now 20-month layoff. Um, and while I could see the UFC picking Usman over Covington in a robbery, save for the sake of this video, um, Covington did enough to win. Once again, I'm not saying that he did or did not against Usman in the second fight. That doesn't matter. I'm saying let's just say it was a robbery. Um, it was a robbery in Usman's favor. I can see the UFC picking Usman over Covington because Usman just knocked out Jorge Masvidal. He was a big star, had an amazing 2021 number one pound for pound fighter. I could see the logic being in order to beat the champ, you got to beat the champ in that fight. Between Leon Edwards and Colby Covington, let's be real here. The UFC is going to rather pick Colby Covington. Okay, it's no secret. And that's why I feel like it's very likely that Colby Covington wins this fight if he makes this fight close enough. Definitely if it's a fight that could go either way, then the UFC will give it to Colby Covington. Even if Leon Edwards just edges it out, I think that if you can maybe make a small argument that Colby Covington wins the fight, the UFC will give it to Colby Covington. That's my prediction here. It's something past how the fighters actually perform in the fight. I think that it's going to be a Colby Covington decision. Call me bold, maybe call me a little disrespectful to the UFC for not being as professional. But once again, I feel like it's kind of blatant at this point. If Colby Covington makes a good enough case, which doesn't even have to be winning on definitively, I think Colby Covington could take this fight by decision. There you have it. That's my prediction. Colby Covington by decision. Potential robbery. All I could hope for is at the end of the day, the winner goes to the better fighter, fair and square. That's what I could hope. Um, and not really too interested in either of these fighters, so I'm just gonna enjoy it, enjoy the fight, and yeah, that's my predictions for the last UFC card of the year. Woo! Lots to talk about, lots to talk about. But I think if there are lots to talk about, then that means there's a lot of compelling matchups. Really great card to end out the year. Let's hope it delivers like it has on paper. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for a great year of UFC predictions. First full year. If you've been here the whole time, I appreciate y'all. We got some videos in development. I got a One Piece arcs tier list in development. I got my movies rewatched video in development, and of course, I have my 2023 manga tier list also in development that will be coming out within the next few weeks. Thank you all for watching, and yeah, I'll catch you later.